Dreamers, my name is David, and it's an honor to share this moment with you. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let love gently infuse every word. Join me in today's story. The church falls silent when his ex-lover arrives at the wedding accompanied. Guests can't believe what they see. On a cold but sunny morning, Anastasia Carter smoothed the only elegant suit she owned in front of the cracked mirror of her small apartment. Emotion and nervousness competed in her chest as she mentally reviewed the reasons that had led her to secure that coveted position at Valdivia Holdings. Raised in a humble neighborhood where dreams often faded before they were born, Anastasia was a rare exception, a 24-year-old whose determination had led her to defy all odds. Her intelligence, combined with an unbreakable work ethic, had opened doors to a world that had always seemed unreachable. The imposing Valdivia Holdings building, with its glass and steel facade reflecting the city's bustle, intimidated even the most confident. Anastasia crossed the threshold with a firm step, but her sweaty hands betrayed her apparent self-assurance. Upon being introduced to her boss, Adrian Valdivia, a man whose presence seemed to fill every corner of the room, she felt a mixture of respect and curiosity. Adrian was the definition of success, impeccably dressed, with a serene demeanor and dark eyes that seemed to scrutinize the soul of anyone who dared to look directly at him. From the first moment, Adrian was intrigued by Anastasia's frankness and freshness. In a world surrounded by flatterers, her sincerity was a breath of fresh air. For Adrian, life had been a series of calculated moves. Born into a wealthy family, he had inherited not only riches, but also the expectations and responsibilities that came with them. Although outwardly he seemed to have it all, loneliness had become his most constant companion. In the following days, the dynamic between them evolved unexpectedly. As Anastasia struggled to adapt to the demands of her new environment, her indomitable spirit began to break down the barriers Adrian had built around himself. Work meetings stretched into conversations that seemed to drift towards more personal topics, and moments of shared silence were filled with a tacit understanding. One Friday evening, when the office had emptied, Adrian approached Anastasia with an unexpected invitation. His voice, always controlled, held a hint of vulnerability. "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" he asked, avoiding her gaze as he unnecessarily adjusted his shirt cuffs. Anastasia, surprised but unable to refuse, accepted with a slight nod. That night, under the city's twinkling lights, they shared a dinner that marked a turning point. Between laughter and confessions, Anastasia discovered the man behind the mask, someone passionate, vulnerable, and full of unfulfilled dreams. Adrian, for his part, was fascinated by Anastasia's ability to see beyond his facade and connect with him in a way no one else had. The dinner ended with a walk through the quiet streets downtown. The tension between them became palpable, and Adrian, with uncharacteristic shyness, gently took Anastasia's hand. "I don't know what's happening to me with you," he admitted in a whisper, "but I don't want to ignore it." Anastasia looked into his eyes, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Although she knew their worlds were incompatible, something inside her told her that this was just the beginning of a story that would defy all expectations. As they said goodbye, both realized that their lives had changed forever. In that moment, under the faint glow of the streetlights, the first seeds of a love that would face unimaginable obstacles were planted. Elena Blackwood watched with a stony expression from the window of her grand living room. Since childhood, she had dreamed of a future with Adrian Valdivia, the man she had always considered her destiny. She had witnessed his growth, his successes, and had convinced herself that, sooner or later, he would realize that she was the only one who truly understood his world. But everything changed when Anastasia Carter appeared on the scene. Elena, unable to accept that her place in Adrian's life was being threatened, began to weave dark thoughts. In parallel, at a modest cafe in the city center, Richard Hayes drummed his fingers on the table, watching Anastasia from afar. Months ago, he had discovered she worked at Valdivia Holdings. Although his pride had taken a hit when she left him, he never stopped believing she belonged to him. Now, armed with determination and a good dose of resentment, he planned to win her back, even if it meant resorting to questionable methods. Fate brought them together on an unusually cold night. Elena and Richard, two disparate but equally obsessed souls, crossed paths at an art gallery. Elena, known for her ability to manipulate conversations, soon discovered the shared history between Anastasia and Richard. Her smile, cold and calculating, appeared as an idea began to form in her mind. "It seems we both have a common interest," Elena said, approaching Richard with a casual tone, though every word was perfectly calculated. Richard raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. Elena continued, "I want Adrian, and you want Anastasia. Perhaps we could help each other." The proposition hung in the air like a temptation. Richard, initially reluctant, began to consider the idea. Elena explained her plan: to discredit Anastasia in front of Adrian and sow distrust in their relationship. For Richard, it was the perfect opportunity to distance Anastasia from a man like Adrian, someone he considered out of her league. "What exactly are you proposing?" Richard asked, finally revealing genuine interest. Elena smiled, confident she had caught his attention. "Nothing complicated, just a bit of strategic information and a couple of planned coincidences." The following days were a whirlwind of calculated moves. Elena began planting doubts in Adrian's mind, subtly suggesting that Anastasia was not as sincere as she seemed. She used seemingly harmless anecdotes, but laced with venom, to construct a portrait that distanced her from the idealized image Adrian had of her. For his part, Richard approached Anastasia with a mix of charm and nostalgia, reminding her of the good times they had shared. Although Anastasia maintained a respectful distance, his attempts did not go unnoticed by Elena, who manipulated circumstances so Adrian would see them together on more than one occasion. Each carefully planned encounter planted a deeper thorn in Adrian's heart. One afternoon, Adrian confronted Elena about her insinuations. Although he distrusted her motives, doubts began to take root. "Why do you care so much about what Anastasia does?" Adrian asked, frowning. Elena looked down, feigning discomfort. "I just want to protect you, Adrian. I know how hard you've worked to get where you are. I don't want anyone to hurt you." The words resonated in Adrian's mind, who, although he didn't want to believe the accusations, couldn't ignore the growing discomfort he felt every time he saw Anastasia and Richard interact. Meanwhile, Anastasia began to notice the distance in Adrian. His behavior, once warm and close, became cold and unpredictable. Faced with her confusion, she tried to talk to him, but conversations turned into veiled interrogations. The tension between them grew, and the relationship that had begun with so much potential began to crack. Elena, observing from the shadows, savored every moment. Her plan was progressing perfectly, and with each passing day, she was closer to achieving her goal. However, her success was based on lies, and lies, as she knew very well, were double-edged swords. Elena and Richard celebrated their apparent victory in a phone call. "Soon, everything will be as it should be," Elena said triumphantly. "I hope you're right," Richard replied. "I'm not used to losing." Unbeknownst to them, both were setting in motion a conflict that would forever change the lives of Adrian and Anastasia, sowing the seeds of a drama that neither of them could foresee. The hotel's main ballroom, adorned with crystal chandeliers and tables covered in white tablecloths, exuded elegance and luxury. The charity gala organized by Valdivia Holdings was the event of the year, and Adrian Valdivia, impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, moved among the guests with the grace of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. By his side, Anastasia Carter tried to maintain her composure. Although her navy blue dress highlighted her natural beauty, she felt like an intruder in a world that was still foreign to her. From a corner of the ballroom, Elena Blackwood watched with a cold smile, her eyes fixed on the couple she had sworn to separate. The moment she had meticulously planned was about to unfold, and her ally, Richard Hayes, was strategically positioned, ready to act. Richard approached Anastasia as Adrian conversed with a group of businessmen. His demeanor was casual, but his intentions were far from innocent. Feigning interest in the gala, he initiated a conversation that soon turned more personal. "Isn't it curious how fate brings us together here, Anastasia?" he said, leaning towards her, so the words seemed more intimate than they really were. Anastasia, uncomfortable, tried to pull away without causing a scene. However, Richard, following the plan, seized the moment to create the perfect image. Taking her by the arm, he simulated a gesture of closeness, and in an instant that seemed to stretch endlessly, he tried to kiss her. "Richard, let go of me!" Anastasia exclaimed, pushing him away forcefully. Her face reflected indignation and surprise, but before she could completely pull away, a flash illuminated the space. A photographer, hired by Elena, had captured the scene from the precise angle to make it appear that Anastasia was reciprocating the gesture. The photograph reached Adrian's hands that same night, while guests continued to enjoy the music and champagne. Elena, with an expression of feigned concern, approached him holding an envelope. "Adrian, I didn't want to show you this, but I think you deserve to know the truth," she said, her voice tinged with feigned compassion. Adrian opened the envelope, and upon seeing the image, he felt the world sway beneath his feet. The doubts Elena had sown immediately came to life, and a mixture of rage and pain engulfed him. Without waiting for explanations, he sought out Anastasia, who was across the room. "Is this what you call your honesty?" he spat, throwing the photographs onto a nearby table. His words, laden with bitterness, pierced Anastasia's heart. "Adrian, this isn't what it looks like. Richard he tried to explain." But he interrupted her with an abrupt gesture. "I don't want to hear it," he exclaimed, his voice broken by disillusionment. Anastasia, with tears in her eyes, realized that any attempt to defend herself would be futile. Adrian's words were like an unbreakable wall, and his seemingly solid trust had crumbled in an instant. The relationship ended that night, leaving both of them devastated. Adrian, blinded by his insecurity, took refuge in the solitude he had tried to abandon, while Anastasia, heartbroken but determined, vowed to move forward, even if her heart was shattered. From the shadows, Elena watched the scene with satisfaction. She had won this battle, but she could not foresee the consequences of the lies she had sown, nor the invisible forces that would soon alter her apparent victory. The weeks following the breakup with Adrian were a whirlwind of emotions for Anastasia. Between sadness, anger, and an overwhelming sense of injustice, she tried to move on with her life. However, everything changed one morning when, after days of feeling strangely fatigued, she decided to take a pregnancy test. The confirmation was both a shock and an unexpected blessing. Sitting on the edge of her bed, test in hand, Anastasia felt a mix of fear and determination. Despite Adrian's absence, she was determined to do her best for the little being growing inside her. With a pounding heart, she tried to contact him. Calls, messages, even letters that were never answered. Unbeknownst to her, Elena always alert, ensured that every attempt at contact was intercepted. Adrian, consumed by his own pain and convinced of the betrayal, made no effort to seek the truth, allowing the lies to keep him isolated from what was truly happening. Months passed, and Anastasia faced the difficulties of pregnancy alone. With limited support from her few friends and working long hours to secure a livelihood, she gave birth to twins, Julian and Martina. From the first moment, she knew that these little ones would become her reason for being. Despite the challenges, every smile and every babble filled her life with indescribable love. 5 years later, Anastasia lived a simple but meaningful routine. Her days revolved around work at a small clothing store and the laughter of her children, who were the spitting image of Adrian. Julian and Martina, with their dark eyes and mischievous gestures, were a constant reminder of the man she once loved deeply. Although she had learned to live with that shadow, she never stopped wondering what it would be like if Adrian knew them. One afternoon, while organizing clothes on the store counter, a golden envelope caught her attention. Delivered by a messenger, its elegance contrasted with the simplicity of her surroundings. Upon opening it, Anastasia's heart lurched. An invitation to the wedding of Adrian Valdivia and Elena Blackwood. The words, printed in black ink, seemed to mock her past and the dreams she once shared with him. For days, the invitation lay on the dining table, next to a cold coffee cup and a drawing by Julian. Anastasia debated with herself. Why attend? What would she gain by confronting a past that had caused her so much pain? But an inner voice, the same one that had sustained her in the darkest moments, told her she had to close that chapter, not just for herself, but also for her children. It was time for Adrian to know the truth, even if from a distance. The wedding day arrived with an air of solemnity. Anastasia dressed Julian and Martina in simple but elegant clothes, while she chose a dress that highlighted her natural grace without ostentation. Upon arriving at the cathedral, the guests' gazes fell upon her, first with curiosity, then with disbelief. Her presence, though discreet, radiated a strength that could not be ignored. Inside the venue, Adrian stood at the altar, waiting for his future wife. When his gaze met Anastasia's, time seemed to stop. Memories, buried under layers of resentment, surged with overwhelming force. But what truly took his breath away was seeing the two children accompanying her. Their eyes, their gestures. It couldn't be a coincidence. During the ceremony, Adrian struggled to maintain his composure. Although Elena tried to capture his attention, he couldn't tear his gaze away from Anastasia and those little ones who, unknowingly, had begun to change everything. After the ceremony, at the reception, Anastasia kept to herself, observing from a corner as Adrian greeted guests. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, he approached. Each step was a mixture of doubt and an uncontrollable urge to get answers. "Who are they?" Adrian asked, his voice laden with an emotion he couldn't disguise. Anastasia looked at him with a calm she didn't feel. She knew this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it to be so overwhelming. "They are Julian and Martina," she replied firmly. "Your children." The words fell like thunder, shattering any vestige of security Adrian might have had. As the children, curious, timidly approached, the air filled with unasked questions, contained emotions, and a destiny that was about to change drastically for everyone. The wedding reception was a meticulously orchestrated display of luxury. Guests, wrapped in superficial conversations and calculated laughter, moved among tables adorned with ostentatious floral arrangements. However, for Adrian Valdivia, all that splendor had lost its meaning. His world had changed in an instant, and the two small figures now timidly clinging to Anastasia's dress occupied all his thoughts. Adrian stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the children. Julian, with a slight frown, observed him with the same intensity Adrian recognized each morning in the mirror. Martina, shyer, squeezed her mother's hand as she tilted her head with curiosity. The air seemed to thicken, charged with emotions and unasked questions. "They are my children, Adrian." Anastasia's voice cut through the silence between them, firm but trembling. "I tried to tell you, but you never gave me the chance." The impact of those words left Adrian breathless. In his mind, the pieces began to fall into place. The lack of contact, the suspicions sown by Elena, his own emotional blindness. Everything formed a picture he couldn't ignore. He tried to approach, but Julian, with a protective gesture, stepped between him and Anastasia. "Why are you looking at my mom like that?" the boy asked, with a mixture of courage and innocence that struck Adrian deeply. "No, I don't know," Adrian admitted, looking down at the little ones. His voice, normally controlled, was broken by confusion and guilt. "I suppose I'm trying to understand something I should never have ignored." Before he could say anything more, Elena appeared, her smile tense and her presence markedly ill-timed. Holding a glass of champagne, her tone was sweet, but her gaze betrayed her unease. "Adrian, what are you doing here? Everyone's waiting for you." Her attention quickly turned to Anastasia and the children, and her lips curved into a feigned smile. "I see you've brought unexpected company." Anastasia, with the strength she had cultivated in recent years, straightened up and held Elena's gaze. "Yes, I'm here because I thought it was time Adrian met his children, something you made sure to prevent all this time." Elena chuckled nervously, trying to maintain her facade. "What are you talking about? I didn't know anything about this." But Adrian, now observing her with a mixture of disbelief and suspicion, interrupted. "Is that true, Elena?" he asked coldly. "Did you really know nothing? Because every time Anastasia tried to contact me, you seemed to be right in the middle." Elena's smile crumbled, and for a moment she seemed to hesitate. But before she could respond, Anastasia stepped forward, determined. "You sent that invitation to humiliate me, to make sure I remembered my place. But you forgot something, Elena. The truth always finds its way." Murmurs among the guests began to grow, and Elena, feeling control slipping away, tried to change the subject. "Adrian, you don't have to listen to this. She's just trying to ruin our wedding." "Our wedding?" Adrian repeated, with bitter sarcasm in his voice. "Elena, I think that's enough." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Adrian took a step towards Anastasia, his expression softening as he looked at the children. There were so many things he wanted to say, so many apologies to offer, but the weight of the moment left him paralyzed. Finally, he turned to Elena, his decision clear. "This is over," he declared firmly. "I cannot go forward with someone I no longer trust." Elena tried to protest, but Adrian was no longer listening. The whispers of the guests became a distant backdrop as he took Anastasia's arm and led her out of the hall, Julian and Martina following closely behind. In the silence of a nearby park, far from the wedding bustle, Adrian finally found the words. "There are no excuses for what I did. I let myself be manipulated, and my pride blinded me. But I should never have left you alone. I should never have—" His voice broke, and for a moment he seemed as vulnerable as ever before. Anastasia watched him, her heart divided between resentment and a hope she couldn't suppress. She had waited for this moment for years, but now that it was here, she didn't know if she could trust him again. "Apologies are not enough, Adrian." Her voice was firm, though it trembled slightly. "It took 5 years for you to finally see the truth. I don't know if I can ever believe in you again." "I don't expect you to immediately," Adrian replied, with a sincerity that was undeniable. "But I want to be here, for you and for our children. And I will do whatever it takes to earn that trust, even if it takes me my whole life." Julian and Martina, oblivious to the emotional tension, scampered nearby, their laughter breaking the seriousness of the moment. Adrian watched them with a mixture of awe and regret, recognizing all that he had lost. "They deserve to know their father," Anastasia continued, crossing her arms. "But this time, things will be done on my terms. If you fail, there will be no second chances." Adrian nodded, knowing he couldn't ask for more. For the first time in years, he felt he had something truly worth fighting for. That night, back in her small apartment, Anastasia stayed awake while the children slept. Adrian's words echoed in her mind, along with the echo of her own feelings. She had loved that man once, deeply, and although the pain was still fresh, a small spark of hope began to emerge. Adrian Valdivia had faced many challenges in his life, but none compared to the one he now faced, winning the hearts of his children, and even more so, Anastasia's. For days, his mind had been occupied planning how to rebuild what he had destroyed. But every step he took seemed to be laden with uncertainty. The first time he visited the small apartment where Anastasia lived with Julian and Martina, he arrived with a bouquet of flowers and 2 carefully chosen toys. He paused in front of the door, taking a deep breath before knocking. Anastasia opened cautiously, her expression a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "Adrian, what are you doing here?" she asked, crossing her arms while keeping the door ajar. "I want to see the children. And you. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I want to try," he replied, with a humble tone that contrasted with the image of the confident businessman Anastasia remembered. She observed him carefully, searching for signs of sincerity. Finally, she nodded and let him in. Inside, Julian and Martina were sitting on the floor, surrounded by drawings and building blocks. Seeing Adrian, both looked at him with inquisitive eyes. Julian was the first to break the silence. "Are you Mommy's prince?" he asked, remembering a comment he had heard in a story Anastasia told them. Adrian smiled slightly, kneeling to their level. "No, but I hope to be someone important to you someday." Anastasia remained distant, watching from the kitchen as she prepared tea. Her heart, torn between resentment and the love she still harbored, didn't know how to process Adrian's presence in her home. As the weeks passed, Adrian did everything he could to be present. He took them to the park, read them bedtime stories when Anastasia allowed, and patiently listened to Julian and Martina's endless questions. As the children timidly began to call him Daddy, his heart filled with a mix of joy and guilt. One afternoon, while they were at the park, Martina asked him, "Why weren't you with us before?" The question, direct and laden with innocence, left Adrian speechless for a moment. Finally, he sat beside her on the grass and answered honestly, "Because I made a big mistake, Princess. But now that I'm here, I promise not to leave again." Martina looked at him seriously before nodding, as if accepting his answer. One night, while the children slept, Anastasia and Adrian had their first honest conversation since their reunion. Sitting in the small living room of the apartment, the silence between them was thick. "You're doing a good job with the children," Anastasia finally said, breaking the silence. Adrian sighed, grateful for her words. "Thank you, but it's not enough. I want you to trust me again, Anastasia. I want to recover what we lost." She looked at him intently, her eyes reflecting years of pain. "How can I trust you, Adrian? You left me alone when I needed you most. You didn't listen. You didn't believe me. What assures me you won't do it again?" He looked down, unable to hold her gaze. I can't promise you I won't make mistakes, but I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to show you that I have changed. Just give me a chance." Anastasia didn't respond immediately. Her heart wanted to believe him, but her mind urged her to protect herself. Finally, she sighed deeply. "I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I won't stop you from being with the children. They need their father." Adrian nodded, accepting her decision even if it pained him. In the following days, Adrian continued to build his relationship with the children. Every small step forward, from a shared laugh to an unexpected hug, filled him with hope. However, with Anastasia, progress was slow. Although their interactions were more cordial, she continued to maintain an emotional barrier that he didn't know how to overcome. One day, while the four of them were at the zoo, Julian pointed to a group of lions and said excitedly, "Daddy, look! They're like a family, right?" Adrian nodded, smiling as he looked at the children. Then, his gaze met Anastasia's, who, for a brief instant, allowed a genuine smile to show. It was a fleeting moment, but enough for Adrian to know that there was still hope. Days passed in a new and peculiar routine for Adrian Valdivia. He had left behind the boardrooms and long work hours to invest his time in something much more significant, being present in the lives of Julian and Martina. Each afternoon found him sitting in the park, helping Julian perfect his soccer shots or accompanying Martina in her attempts to catch butterflies. It was a new world for him, full of laughter, discoveries, and small moments that felt like victories. Anastasia observed this change from a distance, analyzing every gesture, every word. Despite her efforts to remain firm in her decision to protect her heart, she couldn't help but notice how Adrian had evolved. The self-centered, controlling man she knew years ago seemed to have been left behind, replaced by someone more human, more aware of his mistakes. One afternoon, as Adrian read a story to the children in the living room, Anastasia paused at the threshold, a cup of tea in her hands. The scene in front of her was disarming. Adrian, with his calm voice and gentle gestures, captivated Julian and Martina's attention as if he had always been a part of their lives. A pang of nostalgia and tenderness settled in her chest, reminding her why she had once fallen in love with him. However, the wounds of the past still lingered, dormant. That night, when the children had fallen asleep, Anastasia and Adrian sat in the small living room. The silence between them was comfortable, but laden with unspoken words. "You've changed," Anastasia finally said, breaking the silence. Adrian looked up, surprised but grateful for her words. "I had to," he replied sincerely. "I couldn't continue being the man I was and expect to deserve you or the children." Anastasia looked away towards the window, where the city lights twinkled in the distance. "It's hard for me to trust all this, Adrian. I know you love the children, and they adore you. But I'm still afraid." "Afraid of what?" he asked, his tone full of concern. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting years of pain and struggle. "Afraid of opening up to you again and having everything fall apart. I spent too much time rebuilding myself alone, and I don't know if I could bear it again." Adrian nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He knew that promises wouldn't be enough. He would have to demonstrate through actions that he was worthy of her trust. As the weeks passed, Adrian continued to dedicate himself to his family. He organized trips to the zoo, helped with Julian's school projects, and prepared impromptu dinners that often ended in laughter over some culinary disaster. Little by little, Anastasia began to lower her guard. Their interactions became more relaxed, and furtive smiles began to appear more frequently. One afternoon, while strolling through a local fair, Adrian noticed Anastasia stopping in front of an artisanal jewelry stall. Her fingers brushed a small heart-shaped pendant, but she quickly put it down and kept walking. Without saying anything, Adrian returned to the stall later and bought it, carefully putting it in his pocket. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Adrian approached Anastasia with the pendant in his hand. "I saw you liked this," he said, extending it to her with a shy smile. "I want you to have it, as a reminder that, although I can't change the past, I'm here to build something new." Anastasia took the pendant with trembling hands, her gaze fixed on the small object. For the first time in a long time, she felt her defenses begin to crumble. "Thank you, Adrian. It's beautiful." Her words were simple, but laden with meaning. Although she was not yet ready to completely surrender her heart, that moment marked an important step towards reconciliation. Adrian also took time to reflect on his own mistakes. One afternoon, while alone in his apartment, he reviewed the messages and letters Anastasia had tried to send him years ago. Reading her words, filled with desperation and hope, was like a direct blow to his soul. He realized how much he had failed, not just as a partner, but as a human being. At that moment, he swore he would do everything possible to make it up to her, even if it took the rest of his life. For her part, Anastasia also began to reflect on her situation. Although her pride remained an obstacle, she couldn't deny that there was still love for Adrian in her heart. Seeing him try so hard to be present for their children, to earn their trust and hers, gave her a new perspective. Maybe, just maybe, there was an opportunity for them. One night, as they watched a movie together in the living room, Adrian, without much thought, took Anastasia's hand. She didn't pull away. Both remained silent, sharing a moment that, although simple, was full of meaning. For the first time in a long time, Anastasia felt she could believe him. And with that belief, a small spark of hope, though fragile, began to illuminate the path to a future that, together, they could build. Night slowly fell over the city, and the lights of the buildings twinkled through the windows of Anastasia's apartment. Julian and Martina slept soundly, exhausted after a day full of games and laughter in the park. Silence filled the room, save for the faint sound of the wind blowing outside. Anastasia, sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea in her hands, looked out the window, lost in thought. Adrian sat at the other end of the room, nervous. For weeks he had been looking for the right moment to talk to her, to open his heart and confess everything he had been holding back. But now, with her in front of him, the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. "Anastasia," he finally said, his voice breaking the silence. "There's something I need to tell you." She turned her head, surprised by the serious tone of his voice, and looked at him directly. His eyes, dark and sincere, showed a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I'm listening," she replied, positioning herself to give him her full attention. Adrian took a breath, searching for the right words. "I know I can't erase what happened, and I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but what I feel for you has never changed. From the moment I met you, I knew you were different, that there was something about you that I couldn't find in anyone else." Anastasia kept her gaze fixed on him, trying to control the emotions that were beginning to stir inside her. It wasn't the first time she had heard beautiful words, but something in Adrian's tone, in the sincerity it reflected, made her heart beat faster. "Adrian, I don't know if I can believe what you say. I spent years alone, raising our children without your support. I felt invisible to you, as if we had never meant anything." Her voice broke at the end, betraying the strength she tried to project. Adrian leaned forward, desperate to make her understand. "I don't want you to feel that ever again. I know I failed you, and I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. But I want you to know that every day since you came back into my life, I've tried to be better, not just for Julian and Martina, but also for you. Because I still love you, Anastasia. I've always loved you." The words floated in the air, loaded with weight and meaning. Anastasia looked away, feeling tears fill her eyes. She had waited so long to hear something like this, but doubt and fear were still present, reminding her how much she had suffered. Loving isn't always enough, Adrian. Trust breaks. Wounds leave scars. I don't know if I can trust you again in the same way. Adrian nodded slowly, accepting her words. I understand, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that you can trust me again. I know it won't be easy, but I'm here, willing to fight for you, for our family, for what we could be. Anastasia looked at him again, seeing the intensity in his eyes. Something inside her, a corner she had kept protected, began to yield. Although her fears were still there, the love that had never completely disappeared was also born. I promise you nothing, she finally said in a whisper. But I'm willing to try to open that door, little by little. The smile that illuminated Adrian's face was one of pure gratitude. It wasn't a promise of eternal love, but it was a beginning. And for him, that was enough. Without another word, he sat beside her on the sofa, letting the silence speak for them. It was a silence filled with hope, unresolved emotions, and the possibility of a future together. That night, under the glow of the city lights, something changed between them. Although the road ahead was long, the spark that still burned in their hearts began to grow, illuminating the first step towards a new opportunity for love. The air was heavy, charged with tensions that even the passing days couldn't dispel. Although Adrian had gradually begun to win Anastasia's trust and his children's acceptance, the echoes of the past remained, haunting every new step towards the future. One afternoon, while Anastasia was picking up the children from school, she received an unexpected message on her phone. Upon opening it, a knot formed in her stomach. It was a photo of Adrian, with Elena at what appeared to be a private meeting. The image, taken from an intentionally ambiguous angle, was accompanied by an anonymous message. Do you really believe he has changed? Anastasia felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. Although in recent months Adrian had proven to be a different man, doubt again settled in her mind, reminding her of the pain she had endured in the past. She put her phone in her bag, striving to maintain her composure in front of Julian and Martina, who were running towards her with their backpacks full of drawings and childhood dreams. That night, while the children slept, Anastasia confronted Adrian. Sitting in the small living room, the atmosphere between them was tense. I received this, she said, showing the photo on her phone screen. Her voice was low but firm, reflecting the mix of emotions that overwhelmed her. What does it mean, Adrian? He took the phone and looked at the image in silence. His normally controlled face showed a mixture of disbelief and frustration. This isn't what it looks like, Anastasia. Yes, I met with Elena, but it had nothing to do with us. She wanted to discuss pending business matters about the company, and I agreed because I thought it was the right thing to do. There's nothing more. And why didn't you tell me? Anastasia asked, her gaze fixed on him. How do you expect me to trust you if you hide things like this? Adrian let out a deep sigh, understanding the impact of his decision. You're right. I should have told you. I didn't want to worry you, but that doesn't justify my lack of transparency. I promise I won't make that mistake again. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but Anastasia still felt the weight of her own insecurities. It's not just about this photo, Adrian. It's everything we've been through, everything I still haven't managed to overcome. Every time it seems like we're moving forward, something like this reminds me why I built these barriers in the first place. Adrian nodded, knowing that words alone weren't enough to repair what was broken. In the days that followed, Adrian redoubled his efforts to demonstrate his commitment. He began by being more open, sharing every detail of his meetings and important decisions with Anastasia. He also organized a special family outing, taking them to a small country house where Julian and Martina spent hours playing in a nearby lake, while he and Anastasia watched from a safe distance. "Those two have your energy," Adrian commented, breaking the silence between them as he pointed to the children. Anastasia smiled, though her expression remained cautious. "They are the best reminder of what's worth fighting for," she replied, her tone loaded with meaning. Later, during dinner at the country house, Adrian did something unexpected. In front of Anastasia and the children, he apologized again for all the mistakes of the past. It wasn't a rehearsed gesture or a grand declaration, but a sincere acknowledgement of his failures and a renewed commitment to the future. "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I'm here to stay, no matter what. I don't want you to ever feel again that you can't count on me." Martina, with the innocence of her 5 years, took her father's hand and squeezed it, while Julian, more reserved but equally happy, nodded with a shy smile. Anastasia, though still conflicted, felt a small crack in her defenses begin to widen. A week later, Elena unexpectedly reappeared at Valdivia Holdings' offices, attempting to reclaim her influence over Adrian. However, this time was different. Adrian confronted her with calm firmness, making it clear that their personal and professional relationship had definitively ended. "Elena, I appreciate what you did for the company in the past, but I will not allow you to continue interfering in my life," he said, his voice sharp but respectful. "I wish you the best, but this is the last conversation we'll have on this subject." Elena, unable to hide her surprise, left, knowing she had lost any control she once had over him. When Adrian told Anastasia this that night, she couldn't help but be impressed. Although doubts still lingered in her mind, she couldn't deny that he was doing everything possible to show her that he had changed. Finally, during a sunset walk with the children, Anastasia and Adrian lagged behind, while Julian and Martina frolicked down a path. The golden sunlight illuminated their faces, and the fresh air brought with it a sense of calm. "I've been thinking a lot about all this," Anastasia said, breaking the silence. "And although I'm still afraid, I'm starting to believe we can make it work." Adrian stopped, surprised but hopeful. "Really?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Anastasia nodded, looking at the children before returning her attention to him. "It won't be easy, but I'm willing to try. For them, and for us." Adrian took her hand carefully, as if afraid to break the moment. "Thank you, Anastasia. I'll do everything I can not to disappoint you." As they continued walking, Julian and Martina's laughter filled the air, a reminder of what they had built together. And for the first time in years, both felt that the future belonged to them. The country house Adrian had rented for that special night was decorated with a simple yet warm touch. Warm lights hung in the garden, illuminating the outdoor table, adorned with wild flowers and aromatic candles. Julian and Martina romped among the nearby trees, their laughter mingling with the soft whisper of the wind. For Adrian, this night meant more than just a simple dinner. It was the moment he would finally take a decisive step towards the family he dreamed of building. Anastasia arrived with the children, wearing a simple yet elegant dress that highlighted her natural beauty. As she crossed the threshold of the garden and saw the effort Adrian had put into every detail, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and emotion. Her heart, though still cautious, began to beat faster. "This is beautiful, Adrian," she said, her voice soft as she surveyed the scene. Adrian, nervous but determined, approached and smiled. "It's for you all. I want tonight to be special, like a new beginning." The dinner unfolded in a relaxed atmosphere. The children, fascinated by the lights and the food, filled the table with laughter and innocent comments. Adrian made sure to include their favorite dishes, a detail that did not go unnoticed by Anastasia. Every gesture, every word, reinforced the idea that he was committed not only to her, but to the entire family. When dessert was finished, Adrian rose from his chair and asked for everyone's attention. Julian and Martina looked at him with curiosity, while Anastasia watched, surprised by the sudden change in his tone. "I want to say something important," he began, looking at Anastasia and then at the children. "These past few months have been the most meaningful of my life. I have learned that family is not something to be taken for granted, but something that is built with love, effort, and commitment. And you are my family." He paused, reaching into the inner pocket of his jacket for a small velvet case. Opening it, he revealed a simple yet meaningful ring. "Anastasia, I made many mistakes in the past, but everything I have done since you returned to my life has been to show you that I want to be with you, not just as the father of our children, but as your partner, your support, and someone you can trust." He knelt before her, taking her hand. Anastasia's eyes filled with tears, while the children watched with a mixture of emotion and awe. "Will you marry me?" Adrian asked, his voice trembling slightly, but laden with sincerity. The silence that followed was brief, but intense. Anastasia looked at the ring, then at Adrian, and finally at Julian and Martina, who seemed to be holding their breath. In their faces, she saw not only Adrian's hope, but also that of her children, who dreamed of a complete family. With a smile that illuminated the entire garden, Anastasia nodded. "Yes, Adrian. Yes, I will marry you." The children's joy was immediate. Julian jumped from his chair and hugged his mother, while Martina clung to Adrian's neck, laughing with a pure, childlike happiness. Adrian, unable to contain his emotion, stood up and hugged Anastasia, feeling every barrier between them finally crumbling. After dinner, while the children played near the lake illuminated by the moon, Adrian and Anastasia sat together, watching them in silence. Adrian took Anastasia's hand, lacing their fingers together. "Thank you for giving me this chance," he said, his voice low but full of emotion. "I promise I won't fail you." Anastasia looked at him, seeing in his eyes a sincerity she hadn't seen before. Although there were still wounds to heal, for the first time she felt she could fully trust him. "I know, Adrian. That's why I said yes." The night ended with a family hug under the stars. In that moment, with Julian and Martina nestled between them, Adrian and Anastasia felt they had finally found the place where they belonged, together. As a family united by love and the determination to overcome any challenge the future might bring. The sun shone softly on the gardens of the small estate where the wedding would be held. The ceremony had been carefully planned, not with ostentation, but with a warmth that reflected the essence of the family. Anastasia and Adrian were forming. Wildflowers adorned the improvised altar, while white wooden chairs lined the lawn, occupied by close friends and family who had accompanied the couple on their journey. Martina and Julian, dressed carefully, ran among the guests, their laughter filling the air with joy. Martina held a small bouquet of daisies, and Julian, with a solemn bearing that contrasted with his natural mischief, carried the rings on a velvet cushion. For them, this day was more than a celebration. It was the promise of a complete home, full of love and security. Anastasia, wearing an elegant lace dress, walked towards the altar with a serene smile. Her gaze sought Adrian, who waited for her with eyes full of emotion. In that moment, all the doubts and fears of the past vanished. The man who now stood before her had shown through actions, not just words, that he was willing to build a solid future for them. The ceremony was brief, but deeply emotional. When it was time for the vows, Adrian took Anastasia's hand and spoke with a firm voice, but full of feeling. "Before our children, our friends, and our family, I want to promise you something more than love. I promise to care for you, respect you, and build with you a home where we can always be ourselves. I promise to be the father Julian and Martina deserve, and the partner you need." Anastasia, with tears in her eyes, responded with a trembling voice, but full of conviction. "Adrian, today I not only accept you as my husband, but as the man with whom I want to share everything we are and everything we will be. I promise to trust you, support you, and love you, not only on happy days, but also on difficult ones, because together we are stronger." Applause erupted as Adrian and Anastasia exchanged rings. Martina, excited, ran towards them, wrapping them in a hug, while Julian, more contained but equally happy, joined with a wide smile. In that moment, all four were complete, united by a bond that time had tested, but that was now stronger than ever. The reception, though simple, was filled with genuine laughter and joy. The children ran among the tables, sharing games with other little guests, while the adults toasted the happiness of the newlyweds. Adrian and Anastasia shared a first dance under the warm lights hanging from the trees, surrounded by emotional gazes. "Do you remember the first time we danced?" Adrian asked, smiling as he held Anastasia close. "I remember," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never imagined we'd end up here, but I'm grateful we made it." He looked at her tenderly, acknowledging the truth in her words. They had traveled a path full of obstacles, but that journey had led them to the exact moment where both needed to be. That night, when the celebration ended, the family returned home, exhausted, but happy. Martina fell asleep in Adrian's arms, while Julian, with heavy eyelids, whispered, "Daddy, this was the best wedding in the world." Adrian smiled, kissing his son's forehead before putting him to bed. When they finally reunited in the living room, Anastasia and Adrian shared a moment of silence, watching how the home they had built was full of life and love. "This is all I ever wanted," Anastasia said, her voice barely a whisper. "And I will never stop being grateful that you gave me this opportunity," Adrian replied, wrapping her in a protective embrace. The days that followed were a reflection of the new stage they were beginning. Mornings were filled with laughter and the hustle and bustle of the children getting ready for school. Afternoons were divided between homework and games in the park, while evenings ended with stories shared around the table. There was something deeply satisfying in the simplicity of their life together, something both had learned to value after all they had been through. In their new home, the walls were adorned with Julian and Martina's drawings, and the bookshelves began to fill with photos capturing happy moments, their first family outing, the children's birthday, and now, their wedding. Each image was a testament to what they had overcome and what they had created together. A year had passed since that magical night when Anastasia and Adrian officially united their lives. The family home, located in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by lush trees and colorful gardens, overflowed with life and joy. Mornings began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of birds singing, mingled with the laughter and conversations of Julian and Martina as they prepared for school. Adrian, who used to be the first to wake up, enjoyed those quiet moments before the house came alive. He watched Anastasia sleep peacefully, her face illuminated by the soft morning light, and felt immensely grateful for the second chance life had given him. Every day was a reminder of how lucky he was to have such a wonderful family. Anastasia, for her part, had found in Adrian not only a partner, but a true support in all facets of her life. They had learned to communicate openly, to face challenges together, and to celebrate triumphs, however small. Their love had grown stronger, becoming an unbreakable bond that gave them the confidence to look towards the future with hope. Weekends were especially significant for the family. They often organized excursions to the countryside, where Julian and Martina could run free, explore nature, and give free rein to their innate curiosity. Adrian taught them to fish in the nearby lake, while Anastasia prepared a picnic with their favorite foods. These moments, simple but profound, became cherished memories they would treasure forever. One afternoon, as the sun set, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, the family sat around a bonfire. Julian, with his bright eyes, asked, "Daddy, how did you know Mommy was the person you wanted to be with forever?" Adrian smiled, looking at Anastasia tenderly. "Because when I'm with her, I feel like I'm home, no matter where we are. Your mother has the ability to make everything around her better, and I can't imagine my life without her." Martina, snuggled next to Anastasia, added, "And we're part of that love, right?" Anastasia kissed her daughter's forehead. "Of course, my love. You are the best result of our love, and you teach us every day what truly matters." The comfortable silence that followed was filled with understanding and connection. The family looked at the stars that began to appear, feeling that, in that instant, everything was in its place. In the community, Adrian and Anastasia's story had become a source of inspiration. Many knew the obstacles they had overcome and saw in them an example of how love and perseverance could transcend any barrier. Even Elena, who had disappeared from their lives, seemed now only a distant memory that had lost its power over them. Adrian had found a balance between his professional and personal life. He had reorganized his priorities, delegating more responsibilities at work to dedicate quality time to his family. Anastasia, for her part, had resumed personal projects she had postponed, always with Adrian's unconditional support. One night, while they looked through a photo album that chronicled their journey so far, Anastasia reflected aloud, "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Adrian nodded, lacing his fingers with hers. "And every step has been worth it. I wouldn't change anything we lived through, because it has brought us here." She looked him in the eyes, finding in them the same sparkle that had captivated her from the beginning. "Me neither. The important thing is that we are together, and that we will continue building our story, day by day." They kissed softly, sealing once more the commitment they had to each other. Adrian and Anastasia's love had proven to be stronger than any adversity. Together, they had created a home where trust, respect, and joy reigned. Julian and Martina grew up surrounded by that love, learning from their parents the value of honesty and the importance of fighting for what one believes in. Thus, the family continued to move forward, sure that no matter what the future held, they would face it all together. Their story was proof that true love not only overcomes obstacles, but grows stronger with them, becoming an eternal bond that transcends time and circumstances. If this story of love and transformation captivated you, you're in the right place. Here, every day, we share stories that will make you laugh, cry, and above all, believe in the power of love and humanity. Can you imagine how many more stories like Adrian and Anastasia's are waiting for you? Don't miss the next one.